Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we'll be talking about season 3 of the show Industry. Fun fact, Nia DaCosta, who directed the 2021 version of Candyman and The Marvels, was a writer on this show and really helped define Harper's character. And creator Conrad Kay said a lot of Nia's characteristics influenced the positive attributes of Harper. This season came out in 2024 and stars Myha'la, Herrold, Marisa, Abela, Lawtey, and Leung, and was created by Mickey Down and Conrad Kay. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. Industry Season 3 sees us returning to Pierpoint, which looks completely different after layoffs in the previous season. They have decided to shift focus to environmental, social, and governance, or ESG investing, with the big one being Lumi, a green energy tech company that is gearing up to go public. All that can go wrong with Lumi can, and it further puts Pierpoint in a hole that the company might not be able to get out of. Meanwhile, Harper is an assistant for one of Pierpoint's clients after getting fired for not having her degree and longs to get back into the investing side of things. Eventually, she partners with one of the portfolio managers to start a new fund. And while building her fund, Harper seems to also be motivated to expose the weak points in Pierpoint. Industry is a workplace drama. It has similar vibes to Succession, The Big Short, or The Social Network. Industry is a show that gets better with each season. It's very stressful, and a lot of the characters are friends, but the moment there's a great opportunity placed in front of them, then that friendship becomes flexible. The show made me feel like I was in the workplace with the group and felt the stress, which made the episodes go by so quickly. The show doesn't dumb down the terms, so if you're not familiar with the investing slash finance world, don't be shocked. But I don't think that the goal is for you to understand it all. I think it's just to add to the realism, like you were there observing silently. Harper was the main focal point in the last season, and in this season, she takes a slight step back, but she is still very important. Myha'la Herrold plays her brilliantly and does a good job of showing Harper's faults and strengths. In season 1, we learn she doesn't have a degree and she forges one to work at Pierpoint. And by the end of season 2, it comes to bite her in the ass when she gets fired, which I think Pierpoint would have actually overlooked this, but mixed with Jesse doing insider trading, with her, they went that route to not completely ruin her life. She starts this season as an assistant to Anna, who is a client of Pierpoint, and she hates it and really wants to get back into the investing side of things. Harper is very smart and observes the frustrations of a lady who works with Anna by the name of Petra and starts using her knowledge to influence Petra to step out of Anna's shadow, which eventually leads them to creating a fund together that gets a lot of backing. One of the problems with Harper is that she will get the information she needs no matter what, and sometimes the mixture of how the information is gained and how it is used can be illegal. She is fueled by her own motivations, and throughout the season, we see her constantly going behind her friends and partners' backs to do what she wants and dealing with the repercussions later. She uses Yasmin to get information that basically exposes Pierpoint's financial problems, which also opens up that knowledge for the general public, which benefits her but causes her relationship with Yas to fall apart. By the end of the season, she and Petra are on rocky footing because of Harper's ability to not care about the legality of her actions, which causes Petra to try to push her out of the company by talking to one of their big investors, Otto. Otto likes the risk that Harper takes and wants her as a spiritual successor. And at first she declines, but then she comes back with an offer so that she can do it on her terms. The one thing I've always loved about Harper is she doesn't come from the best beginnings, but she works hard and she will get what she wants. In the end, we see she is doing well, making a name for herself as she is in the Forbes 30 under 30. But even with all of this success, she's alone. Yasmin, or Yaz, who is portrayed by Marisa Abela, takes a more front and center role this season as she not only deals with people harassing her for her father's scandals with his company and him assaulting multiple women, but also her having a budding romance with the Lumi CEO Harry Muck, who is a bit of a man child. Homegirl was going through it. Like there are flashbacks of her walking in on her dad eating out some pregnant lady in her bed with his penis out, her being harassed by the paparazzi, her so-called bestie Harper betraying her and almost getting fired multiple times, not because her work ethic, but because of all of the scandal that actually has nothing to do with her. I think because of her dad, she doesn't know how to love people, and all her relationships end up being screwed, especially the one with Robert. It's interesting to see her identify her own lack of understanding of how to love, and how in a scene with Robert in the finale, they are having a nice moment, and she says something kind of rude, which ruins the moment, and Robert explains to her how that wasn't cool. In the finale, she decides to marry Henry, which, from my understanding, will help her get back into high society and use his uncle's influence, which is interesting because Henry is accused of sleeping with employees just like her dad. It is sad to see all of the stuff with her dad's company, Hanani Corp, and how they are trying to make her the public face for her father's scandals, even though she wasn't involved at all. And plot twist, the corporation was actually involved in hiding most of his scandals. Throughout the season, we see, you know, Yaz keep coming back to what happened to her dad. And in one episode, she jokingly says she killed him. Well, we come to find out that it's kind of true. In a flashback, he jokes that he would kill himself to get her reaction, which is typical narcissist behavior. And he jumps off of a boat and she lets him drown instead of getting help. And Harper helps her cover up her involvement. She didn't kill him per se, but she also saw his life in danger and didn't attempt to help. There's one girl who attempts to talk to the press, and in the finale, we see that Yaz has hired her, and the girl starts talking about Yaz's dad, and they have a heart to heart, and it hints that Yaz's dad might have abused her too, but also that some of the people that her father preyed on were underage. Yaz doesn't want to dwell on whatever happened in the past and tells a man to get rid of her, which we are left to wonder if that means to kill her or just escort her off the premises. I feel bad for Yaz and all she's had to go through, but I also see that for all of her actions pretty much are just to ensure that she can live this life that she once lived, where she has all this money and influence and she gets what she wants. In the last season, the billionaire that they focused on was Jesse Bloom, who worked closely with Harper. In this season, the one that we come across is Henry, who is a bit of a man-child played by Kit Harington. Robert is tasked with basically being the peer point contact that's with him at all times so that he doesn't do or say something that will affect the market opening, which is hard because he thinks that what he is doing is amazing and will change the world. Towards the middle of the season, he starts a relationship with Yaz, and with the failure of Lumi, he steps down as CEO before shit really hits the fan. Even with all that happening with Lumi, he is still rich and comes from money, so he lands on his feet, and his scandals are able to be placed onto someone else's shoulders. Robert, played by Harry Lawtey, is probably one of the least problematic characters on this show, and I sometimes feel bad because he gets the shit end of the stick a lot. He doesn't come from money, and while in the previous season he kind of stumbled, this season I feel like he finds his footing, but you can still see how much of this is new to him. He sees influence of rich people, how these rich people are only in their best interests, throwing everyone and anyone in their way under the bus, and how he needs to rely on himself or he will constantly get screwed over. I love how Harry portrays this character with growing confidence levels each season, but also still includes these hints that Robert doesn't understand a lot about the world he is so intertwined in. Robert is the main contact for Nicole, and in the last season, Nicole assaulted a girl who, to my shock at the beginning of this season, is Rob's girlfriend. And to add to that shock, Rob is still hooking up with Nicole. Nicole wasn't my favorite character considering she was a predator and assaulted people, but people didn't say anything because of how much money she would throw at them, which further shows what type of business these people are in. In a shocking turn of events, Nicole randomly dies from whatever, and it was so shocking that she died, but also Robert slowly realizing that she's dead, and then he freaks out, and then he immediately pushes her off, and you just hear this thud, which had me like, oh my God, this is actually her dying. He calls Yaz and tries to vent, but avoids saying what really happened, and Yaz kind of blows him off, which is not shocking because she was going through a lot of stuff and he was being very vague. He came back to the office and just has like a complete mental breakdown and still didn't want to explicitly say what happened, just saying he lost a client. It is sad because it seems like everyone important in his life has died. His mom, Clement, and now Nicole, and he feels guilt as if it's his fault. There is a great moment where Yaz looks at him and realizes that the very vague conversation that they were having earlier is actually about something very serious. The thing that pissed me off was how this was so interesting to me and they never came back to it or brought it up again. They also just never mentioned his girlfriend after she left the company either. The storyline didn't have to be included, but you brought it up and showed how it affected a character and then never addressed it again. Robert is dealing with the death of Nicole and helping with the Lumi launch in the first episode. And after that becomes a disaster. He kind of becomes the only person from Pierpoint who understands Henry and tries to help him not ruin his reputation. The situation is so bad that the government gets involved, and Pierpoint basically hangs Robert out to dry. There is a saying I hear that HR is not there for the employees, but there to ensure that nothing happens to the company. And you might as well add legal to that as well, because they proved that they were there to ensure that the company was safe, even if that meant throwing someone under the bus. It was funny when the lawyer from Pierpoint was like, "Woo, we dodged a bullet." And Robert was like, I dodged a bullet. Because of his not throwing Henry under the bus, he meets with some of the elites and sees how the trial went the way that they wanted it to. And it was all controlled by these rich people. And even, to the public eye, it might have seemed like it went horrible. They, behind the scenes, were just being puppet masters, and it went exactly how they wanted it to. In the end, when they do a time jump, we see Robert starting a company on his own with a donation from Henry, and it seems like him being in the fold is paying off nicely for him, and I can imagine he won't make the same mistakes as Henry. Yaz and Robert was a very slow burn throughout the seasons, and there are some couples that I am dying for them to finally get together, but for these two, I wasn't in a rush. Like, Yaz had so much going on, and I thought she needed to unpack that trauma, and Robert also needed to unpack his trauma, but also figure out how to pave his own path forward. They eventually do hook up this season, which I was still very relieved to see because I was like, eventually they should hook up because they have been basically, teasing each other for a long time. But then this was immediately followed by a heartbreaking scene that actually made me tear up and came out of left field. Yaz and Henry announced their engagement, and in a nonverbal moment, you can see Robert's complete shock and heartbreak, and Yaz also having a moment of sadness over hurting him. This leads to a cool scene where everyone at the table disappears and it's just them two, and they don't really look at each other. And she says, "I'm sorry," and Robert says, "I understand." It was crazy to me because it's so frequent in shows that we ship characters and they have always been shipped, but it was shocking for that ship to finally dock and then immediately get blown to pieces. I feel like they will both benefit from the choice, but it also feels like another person that Robert was close to in his life that he has now lost. Rishi is played by Sagar Radia, and this season he gets way more screen time, which I love to see. All I knew prior to this season was that he was always screaming, but his role seemed important. But he's also a shitty person because he had sex with Harper the night before his wedding. In the season for the 20th episode, we get an episode specifically about Rishi, and it's amazing how much I didn't know about this character, even though he's been on since season one. We see how in his role he is basically gambling money and how he does that in his real life, but also with other people's money. He borrows from people who say they are his friends, but they are just using him because they lend him this money and he has to pay it back with interest, which leads to a continuous cycle and he never really learns. This living on the edge and his money problems catch up to him in the end. When Pierpoint is having problems, he tries so hard to jump ship, but Harper is aware of how he treats people. And when he tries to interview with her, Sweet Pea is there, and he sees Anraj as well, which is thrown in his face considering how bad he treated both of them. Harper basically rubs it in his face that she hired them because they are better people and not him. And he even tries to retaliate and says that, he doesn't, or Harper doesn't know that Sweet Pea's on OnlyFans. And Harper's like, I know, and I let her do her thing. His life falls apart after Pierpoint, and he loses his house from the loss of, all of this gambling. And from the loss of his house, his relationship falls apart with his wife. And in an intense scene at the end, his friend that he owes money to and his ex-wife are arguing. His ex-wife says something that cuts a little too deep, and his friend just shoots her in the head. And I was like, wait a minute, because this show is definitely a drama and there's a lot of stuff going on, but very rarely is someone getting murdered. And I was just as in shock as Rishi was. Rishi's episode showed how he tried to fit in with these white people and how he never would, along with the microaggressions you might face as a Southeast Asian man dealing with a predominantly white, affluent group of people. He has a dog that he gives away named Raja, and the guy calls him Roger because it's hard to pronounce. And eventually, he's like, the name is from Aladdin. It's not that difficult. Then there is a scene of him and his friend walking on his property at night, and an old man comes up asking who they are, and then he says, "Oh, I couldn't see you because it was dark," which is one of those statements where the more you offer up, the more racist you seem. But also, it wasn't even the old man's property, it was Rishi's. The sad part is that he wants to be a part of this group so badly that he also exudes these racist ideas and stereotypes towards people of different races. The one thing that was made very clear by the end of the episode was that no matter how hard Rishi tried, he would never be seen as these men's equal. Sweet Pea worked under Rishi, and in episode 1, I thought she was just going to be some dumb person who doesn't really know what she's doing because all she wants to do is talk about pop culture stuff and gossip. As the season went on, I realized she was very smart and people didn't let her flourish because she was so young. This is one of the biggest problems with Pierpoint, and I especially see it with Yaz. Just because someone else was mean to them when they were at the bottom and made their working environment so harsh, they feel that they need to do the same, even if it means ignoring some good points they made or stealing their idea and taking them as your own. Sweet Pea knew Pierpoint was having problems and tried to bring it up, but was shut down, which irritated me because she was right and it showed that she's way smarter than you think. Sweet Pea is like the perfect definition of like don't judge a book by its cover because Sweet Pea was doing this financial stuff and she also had an OnlyFans and people like Rishi tried to bring her down because she did OnlyFans, but Homegirl was making money on both fronts and she was very smart and even with all of this going on, she still came out on top. Eric is played by Ken Leung, and he is an absolute mess this season. He gets promoted to partner and is also going through a divorce. With this promotion comes more pressure from up top, and they heavily hint that he should fire someone and that someone should be Yaz. But he instead fires Kenny. He was sober before his divorce, and we see how after he's coming into work hungover, looking a mess, while trying to run this team and put on a good face like Pierpoint isn't struggling. He is obsessed with trying to retain his youth, as you can see with him asking everyone he hooks up with if he screws good, and his reluctance to move to a more relaxed role in the company, which to him feels like it's one step into retirement. In the episode on the summit, he basically becomes the face of Pierpoint's failure due to being in the dark about some things and is brought to light by Harper, which I know he hated. He has seen most of the people he hired and seen them throughout their entire career, and he knows how in this industry your friends will and can stab you in the back, which is what I think Bill aimed to do because he is the reason that Eric was even able to be in a position that would see him as the face of failure at Pierpoint. He tries to pin it on other people like Robert, but at the end of the season, he actually pins it on Bill, which is like, damn, because on one hand, Bill was trying to do it to him, but on the other hand, Bill was also sick and potentially dying, and only told Eric, and Eric used that as a means to get Bill out and all of the failures placed on him. In the time jump, we learned that Bill died, which I know for all the shadiness that they had between them, Eric still cared for him. He saves Pierpoint by helping to initiate talks with Al Mirage and shows how his knowledge from his years at Pierpoint were very useful. One thing that also kind of came up with Eric this season is that when he is standing behind Bill and he's whatever the line is he says, I can't remember exactly what it is. It's actually a line that Bill said to him and Harper in the previous season when Bill was telling them about the potential layoffs in the London office as well as having Eric move to a different department, which is where Eric said that it felt like a retirement home. And so it was just kind of a full circle moment to see that stuff that Bill told Eric basically come into play again, and Eric telling Bill in a more shady way. I mean, Bill's way was shady too, but it's just interesting to see that come full circle. Harper and Eric in past seasons seemed like the dream team, but this season their relationship is strained to say the least. The interactions they have this season are flipped now because Harper has power and uses that against him. There's a lot of tension that usually comes up in just hateful looks, but by the end of the season, it comes to a head when Eric goes to Harper's office after finding out about her meeting with Yasmin, and they have a screaming match where he points out her flaws and she pulls out a quote of his own. Everything you do on the floor communicates an ideology that people are a means to an end. I enact your philosophy, and you have the nerve to come into my office and call me a bad person? It was such an intense scene, and I was like, well, I guess they will not be reconciling, but we see them have a moment in the finale where we see that he left a quote for Harper for her 30 under 30 interview, which was nice and made her look better. Sometimes I feel like Eric sees the bad sides of Harper and realizes that he had a role in why she is the way that she is. A recurring theme that's so funny to me in this show is that some of the characters who got screwed over by someone on the show that worked at Pierpoint all work at the same company now. They always come up like once in the season, but we see people who played an important part in the previous seasons or current season get added to this company. This season seems like a small reminder as well of how these companies aren't always there for your best interests. And you have to put yourself first, which is something I think people forget. Every time you see that one HR man in this show, just know that some stuff is about to go down. Eric basically saves the company and leads this merger, and they decide his role is redundant. And while they do give him a hefty $20 million payout, it's still very much a slap in the face. Robert also gets thrown out on the bus, and he's so confused about it and thinks the lawyer is there to help him, but it's just for the company. Bill is the face of Pierpoint's failure, even though they know he's having medical issues, and they decide to spin it so that they're not legally discriminating. When Al Mirage takes over, they let go of the CEO, Tom, because they do not agree with his lifestyle, which hints that he is gay. It's like you have to be cutthroat as it is in the industry, but you also got to watch your back because they might stab you in the back while you're helping them to thrive. Industry shows how everyone has their own motives. People aren't really seen as friends, but more as connections. There are some things they show on screen, like Rishi plotting with Harper so that he lands on 2 feet, but they keep a few surprises, like Sweet Pea and Anraj also secretly planning their escape, and them going to have a moment to completely catch Rishi off guard. It shows how the stressfulness of working in this type of workplace and how you juggle doing your job, dealing with office gossip, office politics, and trying to stay ahead of the company, having financial problems that may lead to you being let go. Everyone is playing a game, and the goal for all these characters is to win that game, but winning just looks different for each person. I love how the show is primarily in London, but we do get to take trips all over the UK, from the city to the country. It's interesting to me because I feel like most finance or investment stuff I've seen takes place in New York, so it's nice to see it happen somewhere else and what that will look like. We get some natives, but we also see some people come from the States to help as well. There is a time jump in the last episode, and while the show was renewed for another season, this made it feel very final. The way that some of the storylines wrapped up also made it seem like it was a good place to end, so I do wonder how they will manage to continue. My favorite part of this show was the episode on Rishi. It really opened my eyes to the fact that he's been around for 3 seasons and I knew nothing about him. I've talked about Rishi in this season already, but I'm just glad he got more time to shine, and it also gave me a little bit more insight on his experiences and his life. Industry Season 3 is the best of the industry seasons, and I'm not saying that the other two aren't great. I'm saying that the show just keeps getting better. The cast is phenomenal, and the story has me completely invested, even though I'm no expert on the financial world. I'm interested in how Season 4 will pick up after this season. Thank you for watching my video. I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. If you have not subscribed, please do so you can keep up to date with more of my videos. But besides that, everyone stay safe, have fun, and goodbye.